Hey everyone, I'm Yvette Lloyd, host of Life Her podcast. I have an amazing guest with me today, Liam Naden. He is a neuroscience based on success coach, author, and also a speaker on who helps people escape stress, overthinking, and struggle by teaching them how to use their brain the way the nature is designed. After going from millionaire to homelessness, Liam discovered that the brain's hidden thrive switch that unlocks natural confidence, clarity, and success without hustle. Hey, Liam, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Yvette. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yes, thank you for being on my show. I really appreciate you.
Great to be here.
Tell me, you went from being a millionaire to losing everything and become homeless. Can you take us back to that moment in your life? What happened and how did it shift your perspective on success?
Sure. Well, like probably you or many of the people watching or listening, and maybe that's why we're all here, is we all want more out of life, don't we? We all want to have a great life. I'm sure none of us want to just live an ordinary, mediocre, boring life. And that was certainly me. And really throughout my life, I've always been this driven, success-driven sort of person, wanting to be successful. And I became very successful. I was a millionaire. I had my own businesses and, multiple homes, lots of freedom, lots of travel, that sort of thing. But it came to a point, and the point you mentioned it, what was the specific moment? It came to a point, I remember this really clearly, where I was putting the finishing touches on my dream home. This was the home that I had on my goals list and visualized that I really wanted to build from the ground up and have all the things that I wanted to have in it, a real luxury home in a beautiful location. And I remember walking into the music room because that was part of my dream, was to have a music room. And I remember walking into the music room this particular day and sitting down and looking out through the windows to the mountains because it had this amazing view. And I remember thinking, this is actually quite incredible. I've always dreamt about having this particular home with all of these things in it, this beautiful mansion. I've always dreamt, it had been on my goals list to have a home just like this. And here I am, I've done it. I've reached the goal, a big goal. And here I am, my life looks amazing. I've got 2 businesses that are working pretty well for me. I've got freedom, I've got money. This is amazing. So I should feel absolutely thrilled, absolutely grateful, and so excited and satisfied with my life that I'd achieved so much. But the funny thing was, I felt the exact opposite. I felt absolutely, completely, and utterly stressed, worn out, exhausted. I was almost in tears. I remember this moment. And I thought, this is absolutely crazy. Why can't I enjoy the success that I have? Why can't I enjoy this that I've created? And it was because, of course, I still had lots of problems. I still had lots of stress in my life. I had things that weren't going well. My marriage wasn't going well. And I had all these problems in my businesses. And I spent all my time trying to fight fires and solve problems. But there was a part of me that thought, is this really what life's about? Do we have to have problems in our life? Are problems the price you pay for success? Are problems and stress, is it inevitable? And although I accepted maybe I have to learn to live with stress and problems, there was a part of me that thought, does it really have to be like this? Because I didn't feel great. It was almost not worth it. And that's when I said to myself, maybe there's another way. Surely there's another way. Maybe it'd be better if I just got rid of everything, lost everything, and then started all over again, because then I could at least keep my soul. Because at the moment it feels like I'm going down this particular path and I'm losing myself. I'm just becoming exhausted. I'm not getting any closer to really feeling fulfilled in my life. And, they sometimes say you have to be careful what you think about, because literally within weeks, that is what happened to me. I lost everything. I became homeless. All the house with the music room and my marriage and my businesses and all my money and all my things, they literally just disappeared. They all collapsed. And I had to
And
move. Yeah.
What um what caused you to actually lose everything?
Well, that's an interesting question because when I had to move back in with my elderly mother and sleep on the sofa in the living room of her small apartment. And that question, what caused all this to happen, that was something I frantically searched for the answer for a long time. Because as I was lying on my mother's sofa and trying to figure all this stuff out, I couldn't work out why it had happened to me. Because it should never have happened to me when you think about it. Because not only had I been a really hard-working, successful entrepreneur businessman, and I'd built up wealth, I'd also been a student of success. I'd been to all sorts of seminars and workshops and read books on, self-help and changing your beliefs and having goals and being motivated and using all of these, reframing your mind type techniques. So it should never have happened to me because it wasn't on my goals list to unexpectedly lose everything. So that was an issue. It was a real problem for me to try and figure out why it had happened to me. And I could look at, okay, all of these things happened, lots of things happened, but why did they happen? What caused them to happen? It's like it just happened out of the blue. So I spent a lot of time trying to answer that question, and I eventually came to the answer. And there was another question I kept asking myself as well, which was, what do I do now? Because here I was in a strange town, didn't know anybody, didn't have any money, didn't have any contacts or resources, and yet I didn't know how to get out of the situation I was in. So I kept asking those two questions: why has this happened, and what do I do now? And eventually I found the answer to those questions. I eventually came to the only answer I could find about why it had happened and what to do next. And you know what the answer was? I wonder if anyone listening or watching might wonder what the answer is.
Yeah.
The answer, why this had happened to me and what should I do now, was I have no idea. I don't
You
know
don't
why it
know
had happened to me.
you don't know how you lost your finances or anything? Was it like for management or
Oh, it was all of those things. Of course, poor decisions, lots of bad decisions that kept creeping up. But I should have been able to hold it together, you would think. But somehow something happened, things happened, and it all got away on me, as it were, and it all just fell apart.
may I ask you a transparent question is how did you treat people?
I thought pretty well. I
That
was
pretty well.
popular with my staff. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah. And I was always honest and hardworking. I didn't, treat anybody, I thought, in a bad way. So again, these were the things I asked. I'm not a dishonest person. I relate well to people. I've built up successful businesses. I wouldn't have been able to have done that if I had no people skills. So,
Right.
it was all a big puzzle. But what I didn't
Wow.
realize is when I accepted I didn't know the answer, everything changed. Everything switched. And my life started to go in a completely different and much better direction really quite quickly. So that's when I decided I need to figure out how life works, how you really get the results you do, both how I got all the bad results and also my new life, because I moved off my mother's sofa after a few weeks. And before I knew it, I had a new business that I owned.
Okay.
And then I met a new partner for a new relationship. And then I started doing all these really strange things like traveling around the world and launch my own brand new yacht. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, is sailing on a yacht around, well, it's actually yacht number 4 we're on now, and running multiple businesses from anywhere in the world. So I said to myself a little while ago, I need to figure out what I'm doing differently, because how is this happening? How do things really happen in your life? Because before, I'd been this student of success, really hardworking, had all my goals, was really clear and had it all mapped out about what I want. I had all my plans. I did courses on how to use your mind correctly and motivation and all those things. And what I ended up with was a whole pile of stress and problems, and then losing it all. But my new life, sailing around the world with multiple businesses and a wonderful relationship, and with no problems or stress, I wasn't setting any goals. I wasn't chasing after opportunities. I wasn't trying to learn everything I could about success. And yet it all seemed to happen. So I thought I need to figure out what I'm doing differently. And that's really the basis of what I teach now. And what I share with people now is that there's a way your brain works that's not to do with your subconscious mind and all of those things we've been taught, because I was taught all that stuff too. I tried all of
Right.
that, all of the affirmations, the visualizing, the goal setting, the meditation. I tried all of them and they hadn't worked. But there's something different that's going on that really creates the results in your life. And that's what as I say, that's what I share with people. And I guess that's why we're talking.
Wow. So when did you first realize that the key to success wasn't more hustle, but it was something deeper, and how did the neuroscience play a role in that discovery?
Well, it was something I really back engineered, because when I started to operate differently, I didn't realize what was going on. I didn't really know what I was doing differently. But that's, as I say, that's what I needed to find out. So it was a few years after that, and I said, I really need to make sure that this keeps going, that I don't
Right.
mess things up this time around. I need to figure out what is working. And it can't be all of the things that I was told are the things that make it work, because none of those worked for me. So what am I doing differently? So that's when I started to back engineer, if you like, or do some research and observing, not only observing what I was doing, but also learning about how the brain works. And not in any sort of technical or extremely technical way, but I studied neuroscience and biology and psychology and all of these things in a way to try and figure out how we get results. And when I started to see, when it started to make a lot of sense, a lot of it comes into religion as well. And I was brought up a Christian, and I couldn't believe that all of the things I was learning about how our brain works, this is all in the Bible. This is taught in the Bible, specifically, very exactly, but we just have never known how to interpret it the right way. So that's when I started back engineering it. And then I started to share this information with other people, because, we've all actually, for the last 12,000 years, humanity has been on the wrong track for a very
Yeah.
specific reason. Something happened 12,000 years ago in our history that caused us to stop using our brain the right way. So
Yeah.
it's about getting back on the right track by understanding how we work, how we operate, how we get the results we do, both good and bad, and direct our life that way.
Yeah. And sometimes God works in mysterious ways. It may be people in your life that didn't belong. It may been something that you unconsciously wasn't aware of, and it happened. It you just never know. You
You're not
just never
supposed to
know.
know. There's
Yeah.
a clue. You're not supposed to know. I can explain why, but we think we're only surprised by what God does because we choose to be surprised. God's not surprised. God
Right.
knows exactly what we should be doing and where we should be going with our life. But we keep getting in God's way, if you like. We keep thinking we know better than God, and we need to
Yeah,
force things in a certain way. That's not the way God operates.
that's true. So you talk about Thrive Switch in the brain. What is it and how does it actually work?
Well, it's basically to go back to using our brain the way our brain was designed to be used. Because just a mini history lesson here, and I won't get too boring with this, but this is quite fascinating, something I discovered, is that the human species, because we live in nature, we're biological beings. We're in this natural world, and there are laws of nature that rule everything. It's a little bit like if you stood on top of a 10-story building and said to yourself, I'm going to jump off into the air and fly. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter how much you pray, how much you believe, how much you change your subconscious mind, how much you visualize, how much you set it as a goal. It's not going to happen. It's obvious. We know that. There's a law of nature that is way beyond our own thinking that we're better than that. So, but most of us all the time, we fight against nature. We don't realize that nature has this system of the way it works. We think that we can bend nature to our will. We can bend God to our will, if you like. But here's the interesting thing, is that if you look at nature, the rest of nature, every living species is built not on struggle, but on thriving, on being its best. If you look at a bird, or an animal or an insect or a tree, they're all just very, very efficiently being and doing what they're supposed to be doing. We're the only species that has struggle and stress in our lives, where most of us are struggling. Struggle is very rare in nature, and you have to start looking to see it, because we've all been told that nature is full of struggle. That's not true. It's, if you watch a wildlife documentary, you think that it's eat or be eaten. But it is not a part of struggle. Struggle is not a part of nature. The most efficient way for nature to survive is not through struggle. So when we realize that, and when we realize that we're different somehow, we struggle, we have problems, the rest of nature doesn't, we need to ask why that is. Why do we have problems? Are we different in any way? Are we somehow unique, that problems and stress are natural for us and we all have it and we all have to have it? Well, here's an interesting thing. Humans have been around for 300,000 years as a species. And, for 97% of that time, until 12,000 years ago, which I mentioned, we didn't struggle. We didn't have problems. We have this idea that there were cavemen who lived these short, miserable, brutal lives. It actually wasn't like that at all. All of the diseases that we have today, cancers, diabetes, heart disease, mental problems, none of them existed. People were far healthier. People were taller by 5 inches than we are today. They had larger brains. They had bigger jaws because they didn't have any teeth problems.
That's true.
And they lived. There's no evidence of wars or large-scale fighting in earlier humans. So we actually lived for 97% of our history. We lived just like the rest of nature does. We were happy, fulfilled. Our lifespan, if you took away the people who died in childbirth, people lived to a very healthy old age, and they weren't suffering from chronic diseases when they died. They just died naturally at age 70 or so. So people much healthier, they were happier, and they were and the reason for that is, and they were living a more natural life, free of stress, because they were using their brain in a different way. But 12,000 years ago, and it's very, very clear, all the records show that we went from really having this very successful life to suddenly, almost overnight, disease came along. All of these diseases that we have today started to show up. And not only health problems, but mental problems, unhappiness, and wars came along that had never been there before. And this pattern of living, we completely changed the way we lived. We started to eat foods that weren't right for us, that weren't designed for us to eat, and we started to get sick from them. And that same pattern is continuing right through today. And it was all due to what I call, what you mentioned, the switch in your brain. We switched the way we used our brain. We stopped living in this thriving way.
It's true. And you know what? Even now, like I will say, before the pandemic and how the world is today, I feel like during the pandemic, the world has switched again, and nothing isn't the same. And it all based upon what you eat too. So it's just a lot of different things and different modes where people are that is affecting the brain for them to be able to be off balance and programmed in many ways too.
Yeah. But, this has been the pattern. There's been a steady decline in human happiness and health for 12,000 years. And it is accelerating. Things like even 100 years ago, which we think, well, we've got so many more advances today, but we've never had more abundance than we have today, and we've never been more miserable. We've never had more health techniques and medical interventions, and we've never been so sick. 100 years ago, or today, our rate of suicide is 10 times what it was 100 years ago.
That's
so
true.
people are far less happy. But this goes back to 12,000 years ago when something happened, and I can explain what actually happened, because this is fundamental. What caused us to use our brain differently and create problems? Because that's exactly what we did. We went from a society of no problems to a society of problems. And it all comes from this. Here's a clue for people to listen. What's the other one thing that we have that the rest of nature doesn't have besides problems and stress? Do you know what the other thing is? The other thing is we have language. We have words. We have ways of describing things. And the funny thing was, up until 12,000 years ago, we didn't have language. Now, you might think, well, language is good, isn't it? It's good that we can talk to each other. You know, it's primitive if you can't talk to each other. We can communicate, we can create all of these things. But here's the problem. This is what language did to the human brain. Because remember, if something existed for 97% of our history for nearly 300,000 years, and then something came along that was different, the brain wasn't designed to use this different thing. The brain was never designed for language. So it dealt with it in a way, or deals and still deals with it in a way that creates all these problems. Because here's what happens when you go from because what people used to do, they lived instinctively. And they
Yes.
live totally in the present moment. And your brain is designed to make sure that you respond absolutely appropriately to the present moment. So everything in your environment, now we know this, if something dangerous is there, you have a fight-flight response. So you jump out of the way if something comes to attack you, and you just do that instinctively. You don't think about it. But we also have all these qualities to respond instinctively with the right action for the right things, to ensure that we thrive, that we become the best that we can be, and that we avoid problems, because problems slow us down and don't
Yeah.
help us survive. So we have all these instincts, but what happened with, but they're designed for the present moment, for this moment, when you're in this present moment, your brain is responding instinctively without you having to think about it, and showing you the very best thing to do, say, whatever it is in the moment. But when we invented language, what actually happened is, instead of responding instinctively to the present moment, we started to create other present moments that didn't exist. We created time. We created the future. And when we started creating the future, we started telling stories about our life. We didn't just experience our life, we started telling stories about things. So we might say, there's some food, I'll eat it. And then we would say to ourselves, well, I've got enough food, but maybe I won't have enough food in the future. Maybe things are going to go bad in my life. Maybe all of these bad things are going to happen to me. So what our brain was doing was telling all these stories through language. We were making up imaginary scenarios, scenes, but the brain is only able to process in the present moment. So the brain
Yeah.
sees all these stories as happening right now. And when your brain sees that you have all of these problems in your life that don't exist because they're in the future, what does it do? It tries to solve all
Tries to
those
solve.
problems.
Yeah, it
It tries
does.
to tell you, you need to do this. You can't be happy now because you might not be happy. You've got to protect yourself from things that don't exist. So it completely overloaded the brain and got us to do what we do now, which is worry about the future through all of these stories that we're telling ourselves all the time. Things could go wrong. You need something else for you to be happy.
That's a lot. So crazy. It's like everybody's like autopilot, like a survival mode where they're at. And honestly, I'm 42, and I think it really has gotten worse since we've been introduced to social media in a different era. Because even when I was in college, my freshman year, we just had Yahoo Messenger where you could just message people. But once it expanded, when we were introduced to MySpace and Facebook, then it goes from Instagram and everything. I think that's where people started to lose themselves, and that's when you were saying like words, the language, it expanded. So what it did was expand people's mindset to either go left or right or in a straight and narrow. So it's like to a point some people just like all over the place mentally, and then the brain is being triggered in so many different and pulled in different ways to a point where you have different things like a reptilian brain, a human brain, a prefrontal cortex brain. Like it's like different areas where people can end up at.
Well, that's right. I mean, what you're really saying, I think, is that we've got a lot more stories that we tell ourselves that we used to.
Yeah.
Sometimes people say, but we live in the best time in history. We're far happier and we're far better off than other people because we've got all these wonderful, and technologies. We can talk to anybody else in the world instantly. We can do so many different things. But what we've also created is we've created a lot more stories and a lot more expectation. So I did a bit of research into this, and for instance, an example, if you were a peasant in medieval Europe, say in the 1300s, were you happy or were you not happy? Were you less happy or more happy than people are today? And what people's living conditions were a lot worse than they are today, obviously, as a peasant, medieval peasant. But people didn't have expectations. They didn't think they should be different. They didn't sit in there working away in the field all day and thinking, this is so unfair. I should be rich. I can be rich. I'll go and, they accepted where they were. They didn't have all these stories, people telling them, you can be a millionaire, and look at this person who's just become a millionaire, and look at this other person, and you can be like them. And, if you take this trip, you're going to be really happy. Or if you buy this car, it's going to make you really happy. They didn't have any of those stories. So they were actually happier than we are today. And what is the measure of success is actually being happy. Is when you feel, because when you're happy, that's when your body and your mind are working the best. That's your biological purpose. That's what's giving you the greatest chance for survival. That's what you're designed for. So we have this idea that, we have so much more, but we've got far more stories. We've got far more triggers that keep telling us, that keep our brain stuck and overloaded and stop us being in the present moment, using our brain instinctually and just allowing things to unfold the way they're supposed to unfold.
Yeah, that is true. So do you believe in setting goal setting that can actually be harmful to success, and why is that you feel like you know we should people do instead?
Well, goal setting, I used to do goal setting, as I said earlier, when I lost everything. I was the master at goal setting. I'd done so many goal setting books and courses on how to do it and how to get really clear on what you want. And I think we have this fixation in life that you need to be clear on what you want in your life. But here's the thing, that doesn't make any sense on a biological or any other sort of level to have goals. And here's why. Firstly, it doesn't work. And I think if people are really honest, and this is what I do if people come to me and want to work with me, one of the first things I say is, how good a goal setter are you? And they say, oh, yes, I've got all my goals. I know what I want. I've got it all written down and planned out, and I've got a plan of action. And then I say, well, how many goals have you ever reached of the ones you've set? What percentage? It's always a very low number. Everyone's out there thinking everyone's achieving their goals. They're not. Everyone's working towards goals, but nobody's achieving many of them. And here's the reason why. When we live in a world where nature does everything with the maximum amount of efficiency, the most efficient way for you to get to where you're supposed to be is for your brain to show you the very next thing to do. It's not to show you the 20 steps. It's not to show you the ultimate goal. Because if somebody had said to me when I was on my mother's sofa, your ultimate goal, the thing that's going to make you really happy, is something you've never ever thought of. And that is to be out there on your own yacht, traveling the world, being a nomad, which I've been for 13 years now, just traveling wherever you want to be, living on a beautiful yacht, and having a business that works for you around the world, sharing with people new ideas about how the brain works, how we're biologically designed to thrive, not struggle. And you're going to be sharing this with people. You're going to be going on podcasts with people like Yvette Lloyd and these great people, and you're going to be sharing all this. Now, if I knew that was my ultimate goal, if I'd set that goal, I would have thought that was absolutely crazy. Firstly, because, as I said, I didn't know how I could ever achieve that. How could I do that? And secondly, I didn't know that's what I wanted. So what would I have done in that case? I would have doubted. Talks about doubt in the Bible, doesn't it? I would have doubted. I would have analyzed. I would have tried to check that this really is what I wanted. I would have thought, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I need to learn and figure out, and I need to go, and before I even do anything, I need to make sure it's right for me. What am I doing biologically? I'm wasting all that energy. I'm not doing anything. I'm not moving along the path of actually getting there. So that's why your brain, as I said earlier, is designed to deal with this present moment and lead you in every moment to make sure you do the right things. It's not biologically efficient to set goals. And therefore, that's why it doesn't work. The most efficient way, as I said, just shows you the next step. And that's what works. And, when you take this approach to life, you end up very often somewhere you had no idea you ever would end up in. And you say things like, oh, this is far better than I could ever have imagined it would be. I had no idea that this is what I'd be doing, but it's far more amazing. And I've talked to many people, very successful people. One man I talked to had a huge business, and he said, Liam, if I'd ever had this on a goals list, I would never have achieved it because it would have limited me. I didn't know that this was what I was going to do, but I just did it. And that's the way we're supposed. That's the way our brain is designed to work. It's not designed to work through goals and plans and trying to figure stuff out. It's designed to show you instinctively exactly the right thing to do.
Wow. So since people will find themselves in survival mode, what is the difference between living in survival mode versus thriving mode?
Well, when you think about it, what causes us to, if we're talking about survival mode, that's the state where we're stressed, we're frustrated, we're worried, maybe we're angry, we're full of anxiety, and we're trying to force things to happen. Maybe we've got our goals and we're really struggling to achieve something. We're saying things to ourselves like, I need to achieve this. I'm going to achieve it. What are we actually doing in that state? Is we're telling stories to ourselves. We're using language again. We're creating scenarios. I'm going to make this happen because if I don't make it happen, I'll never be happy. I will only be happy. I'll be happy when I achieve this, and I'll be so disappointed if I don't. And so say, for instance, in a marriage, I need to make this a good marriage. I need to, and if we've got troubles in our marriage, I need to fix this marriage, because what we're really saying is, I can't be happy unless I fix this marriage. And if I don't fix this marriage, bad things are going to happen to me. My children are going to be permanently harmed. I'll never find somebody else. I'll be left alone and lonely. I'll look back on my life with all the regrets. So what are we doing? What is our brain doing? It's creating all these imaginary stories, these imaginary scenarios, and it can't deal with any of those things. So what we end up doing is we end up doing all the wrong things. In a relationship, we shout at our partner or our spouse, or we say, I don't want you to leave, let's go to counseling and I'm going to fix this, when they're saying they want to leave. That doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
All these things like walk around on eggshells, and we're not being ourselves because we're worried about what the other person might think. So we're not acting instinctively, we're doing all the wrong things. That's what your brain does. But when you move to a different state, to your instinctive state, in other words, what I say, you just need to drop the stories. You need to stop thinking about it. Thinking is not going to get you anywhere. Acting the right way is what's going to get you there. And a good example of this, if I could just say, I'm not sure if your show has a bit of a faith component. I take it it does.
Yes.
What is faith? We talk about faith in the Bible. It says forever what faith is. Faith is believe, but it also says faith is trust, allow, let go. Now, what is letting go? Because everybody says, oh, I let go, I'll let go. But
but what?
They don't let go. There's a part of them that says, I'll let go. But the second that I don't get a result that I think I want, that I think is harmful, in other words, that's based on something that I'm not expecting, then I'm not going to let go anymore.
Yeah.
So what real letting go is, and when you think, if you've ever had that moment where you have felt total unwavering faith and just knowing that God or something's going to work for you, it might have only been in for an instant, but when you feel true faith, you know what you're doing? You're stopping thinking.
Yeah.
You're dropping
your
and it's the same with love. When you feel true love, what is that experience? The funny thing about love and faith is if someone said to you, what is love? You wouldn't be able to describe it. And people throughout history have tried to describe what love is, but you can't use words to describe what love is, but we all know what it feels like.
Yeah, the action.
You just know the feeling. I'm in love. I feel love. But we can't describe it because love is like faith. It exists as part of us beyond words, beyond the stories, beyond It's when we're using our brain instinctively rather than through words. So that's a clue, if you like, as to why language and words get in the way of us living the way we're supposed to live, because we are supposed to live with faith. We're supposed to live with love. They're probably the only things that really exist. And if all you lived with was faith and love,
Definitely.
that's all you
Yeah.
need, isn't it?
That is so true. And it's so funny that you said that because I was raised that way with my mom. I didn't have like any like worries and different things going through my mind. It was just me just having a walk of faith, surrendering, living freely to a point. I didn't have all of these worries in my mind to distract me from the destination that I was going to. It was more or less, I'm living for now. I'm living for
Well,
it at that moment.
yeah. And the other clue to that is in the Bible. It says, seek first the kingdom of heaven and everything else will be provided for you. So you
Yes.
think that's good, but what's the kingdom of heaven? The Bible tells us the kingdom of heaven is within you. So this is in your nature, the kingdom of heaven, to be in the kingdom of heaven. And
Mhm.
then it tells you how to get to the kingdom of heaven, how to find the kingdom of heaven. And it says the only way you can get to the kingdom of heaven is if you are like little children. And what do little children do? That's just what you said. They're
Yes.
not busy planning. They don't have all these stories. They're just living in the moment.
Yeah.
They're
The
living instinctively.
innocence. Yeah,
Innocent. We
their
call it
innocence
innocent.
are there. And
They
that's
don't have
why
language
yes, and
rocking
that's
around their
why I
head.
love working with children a lot because
Mm.
their innocence is there. Their compassion, the way they are just free even with their words. They just know what they see, and they learn what they hear and see. So it just works differently as far as them developing, but as you get older, that's when everything just start
It's when we get the
circulating.
stories. It's when we
Yes.
start creating the stories in our head about what might happen, what has happened, regrets from the past, bad things that could happen in the future. And we lose our connection to our
Yes.
brain, our instinctive brain, and we lose our connection to just doing things instinctively. But
Yes.
yes, the development of children shows us that's why we have this attraction to children and babies. They have this innocence, as you say, this purity. What they're reflecting back to us is the purity and innocence within us that
Mhm.
we are naturally designed to have all of our life, but we've messed it up through telling stories about life rather than just experiencing life.
Yeah.
Even God said in the Bible, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself." In other words, just stay in the present moment, live instinctively, and do not worry about what you shall eat, drink, or wear. It's all going to be provided for you, just like it's provided for everything else in nature. It doesn't say you have to earn it, you have to work for it, you have to be worthy of it. Anything, or if you get it, it's good luck. It's going to be given to you. We're designed biologically to do the things that give us the best instinctively without thinking about it. The
Yeah.
Bible tells us, I mean, when are we going to get the message? But this is the biological explanation of what the Bible is actually saying.
Wow. So one of the things, so like if you could go back and give advice to a millionaire version of yourself before you had lost it all, what would you say?
Well, there's only one thing you need to do if you're faced with any trauma or stress in your life, and just realize that the stress is caused by the stories you tell yourself and that you're going to be okay. Don't worry. And I know it's easy to say, don't worry about it, but just stop telling stories and just do the next thing that comes into your head. And don't judge as to whether it's the right thing. Because here's the thing, when I was living through all of that, I kept trying to figure out what to do. And I kept trying to solve my problems. And I avoided the big issues, which were things like, actually, this marriage is not good. You need to get out of it. That's a big decision to make. It's a scary decision because we have all these stories. I had all these stories about all the bad things that would happen to me if I did end that marriage. So it made me try to force something to happen. Same with things of my businesses. When things weren't going well, I'd I'd say, right, they're the wrong person for that job, but I'll train them up and I'll make it work. Or this is the wrong location for this particular part of my business, but I'll make it work. And we put all this pressure and all this stress on ourselves. Whereas what I should have said, what I would have done if I was living instinctively, was I would have got out of that marriage. I would have got out of that business. I would have got rid of the person who wasn't the right person for the job. I wouldn't have worried about what I thought were the consequences. And they
Right.
would have been the right things to do. But instead, what we do, we avoid, because of our fear, which is just more stories, we avoid doing the things that we need to do. I mean, how many, I've done a lot of relationship coaching, as you might pick up. And how many times do we know, for instance, if we have a friend who's got marriage problems, maybe someone comes and says, I'm not doing too well in my marriage. Now, we can see very clearly what they should do. And we might say, and, you might have been in this situation, I know I have, we say, you're in the wrong relationship. You're in the wrong marriage. It used to be fine, but you just don't get on. You should leave. And you say that to the person, and they say, "Oh no, no, I can't leave. No, I'm going to fight for this marriage. I'm going to stay. I'm going to make it work." You can see the right decision that they need to make, but they can't because their brain is blocking them. Their instinctive brain is not allowing them to see the thing they need to do because they're afraid. They're afraid of what they think might happen. So that's the number one thing that is blocking all of us and creating all the problems. Because when you have a problem in your life, your brain is ready there to actually solve the problem before it becomes a big problem.
Becomes a bigger one. Yeah, that's true.
But if you fight it, if you force it, and if you try and, you know, do something out of fear, you're only going to create a bigger problem.
Mm.
That's the name of the game, really.
It really is. Wow. So where can listeners learn more about your podcast and programs and resources?
Well, actually, it's all on my website, which is just my name, Liam Naden, LiamNaden.com. And I've got lots of resources. I've got a quiz there at the moment, which takes about 1 minute to complete. And that'll show you which part of your brain is running your life. And just
Wow.
knowing that, you can change it. You know, it's really powerful, really simple but powerful, knowing these sorts of things. So I've got a ton of information on my website about how you're designed to work and really what this instinctive way of living looks like. Because it doesn't mean you give up aiming for high things or achieving high things. You actually achieve far more. You're far more productive because your brain is guiding you to take the right actions rather than messing yourself up with trying to fix problems that shouldn't be there. You know,
Yeah.
we've all got those. So yeah, it's all just, or if people want to contact me directly, just send me an email, liamnaden@gmail.com. If anyone's got any questions or comments, I'd love to help in any way I can.
Wow. Liam, I can be transparent with you. When I was younger, my initial reason for going to college was becoming a practitioner nurse and then become a brain surgeon. I had a real obsession with the brain and I knew how to maneuver through life when it comes to me being educated about the brain more. And then as time went by of me having language and different things transpiring in my life, I lost touch of it. And now having this conversation with you, I've noticed I've taken losses myself, just how you took your losses. And now that I have taken those losses, I have transitioned my mindset back from my youth when I had educated myself a lot on the brain, and I found myself decreasing my thoughts and my language and mindset, and even engaging in like certain conversations or like different things that affect you to be able to take in mentally, so it wouldn't distract you on the destination of where you're trying to go, and how you have faith and release a lot of things as far as surrendering to God and just let him guide you through life itself. And I find it quite peaceful now in my life as me being older and um went through different things where I don't really take nothing too personal anymore, and it's been a lot helpful. So it's I could honestly say I understand where you're coming from when it comes to the theological ways of having your mind and having control of it in many ways, because you can digest a lot of things that doesn't belong. And
Mm.
I see why you are where you are at today, from losing millions and you're losing everything to being who you are today.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. Actually, I mean, the shocking realization that we have to come to is that God, through nature, never designed your brain for thinking. It's not designed for thinking. And I know that's shocking, but if you think about meditation, prayer, mindfulness, all of these things are practices in stopping thinking and getting away
Yes,
from your thoughts, getting back to your natural state. That's what faith is. That's what love is. And the Bible says over and over, faith and love. That's what it's all about. There is nothing
yes,
else. So much and all that we want to fix our life or manage our life by thinking about it, we're going in the wrong direction. The brain doesn't work like that. It didn't work for most of our history, for
that's
97% of
true.
our history. It's just not the way it's designed to work. So if you trust, which means you stop your thoughts. Now, obviously, we've got language. We have to think sometimes, but we want to think when we want to think, not have thought use us. We want to use thought for what it's useful for, like communication and planning, but not for running our life through all these stories all the time. That comes back to coming back to the way the brain works instinctively. So, it was a bit of a shock when I concluded through all the evidence that thinking is what gets in the way, but it is the
Yes,
truth.
it is. It's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation and how you just educated us so much and within this few minutes. I really appreciate you, Lam.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Life Her Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and also listen to Life Her Podcast on audio on all major platforms.